Hello, and welcome to At the Wheel. I'm Joe White with Speed Rodeo on Substack. My partner in crime here is Tu Lee of Sino Auto Insights, and our guest is Ed Kim, who is the president of AutoPacific. And as we will do every time we do this, we're going to talk about cars, mobility, things that move, and we're going to talk about that with people who really know what's going on, and Ed is one of those people. Ed, if you talk about AutoPacific, tell us kind of what makes your work distinctive, and then we want to get into kind of what's at the top of your agenda right now.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, too, for having me on. Very honored to be here. So, yeah, again, my name is Ed Kim, and I'm the president and chief analyst at AutoPacific. AutoPacific is a mobility-specific market research and consulting firm. We've been in business since 1986, mostly serving the automotive OEMs, but also the supplier community, as well as a lot of agencies. We've been doing this for a long time. So basically, we're sort of, I guess, in two buckets, I suppose. We have our industry analysis area, which really covers competitive intelligence for the auto industry, as well as forecasting. And then, there are subsets of that where, we're specifically drilling down on, EVs, for example, other alternative powertrains and, looking at consumer demand and forecasting demand for those sorts of powertrains and stuff. The other side of AutoPacific is market research. We do both custom and syndicated work. So, we do a lot of custom research for the automakers. When automakers are developing new products, we will do research on their behalf with consumers. And we also have several key syndicated off-the-shelf research products, such as our Future Vehicle Planner, which contains the Future Attribute Demand Study. It's an annual study that we do measuring consumer demand for new and emerging features. It's really kind of one of the more exciting things we do because we're really drilling down and figuring out what motivates shoppers to want, this feature, that powertrain, this new technology. First of all, we're finding out what the demand for these features and attributes are. And then we're also drilling down into why, what are the motivators of people wanting these new and emerging features. So that's actually a very, very popular study of ours, very popular among the automotive supplier and OEM community, especially as they need to know, what sort of features and attributes their future cars have. So we are a future-oriented market research firm. The future is what we've always focused on. The Future Attribute Demand Study has been kind of our cornerstone syndicated research product for the last 30 years or so. So really, that's kind of what we're about. We're about servicing the mobility industry and, really helping the mobility and automotive industries have a firm eye on the future and really, figure out what to do in these very rapidly changing.
Well, it's been pretty boring the last few months, right?
Yeah.
Boring. There's nothing
boring
to talk about.
So Ed, talk a little bit before we started. We were talking about this, but talk a little bit about in terms of the future about what some of the research you've got going on involving electric vehicles, because the electric vehicle landscape, certainly from a policy perspective, is really shifting as we sit here. So talk about what
and the money that comes along with it.
And the money that comes along with it. So talk about what you see happening.
Absolutely. I mean, up until very recently, we were in a situation where the government was providing a lot of incentives to consumers to buy electric vehicles. And now we're rapidly moving into a space where it's going to be kind of the opposite, where now vehicles in general, including electric vehicles, will be subject to tariffs. The components in them will be subject to tariffs. Their prices are going to go significantly higher. And then also...
But we're not going to pay for it, though, right?
Yeah, no, we're going to pay for it.
Right?
I'm going to pay for it.
Sorry, too.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, no, we're going to pay for it.
But yeah, so we're moving into the space now where electric vehicles are going to be more expensive, a lot more expensive than they've been. What's that going to do to demand? I mean, we're going from a situation where under current proposals, we're now talking about from a federal level, EVs now being charged extra, at registration time. That's the opposite of, really the opposite of what policy up to this point had been. What does that do to EV demand? How is that going to affect?
Let me stop you there, Ed. Do you see EV demand, let's say prior to this unrest and this uncertainty over the last several months, did you see EV demand increasing organically? Did you see how many more vehicles were going to be launched? And has that changed? Because you talk to the OEMs pretty regularly.
Absolutely.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about what's changed from that standpoint.
Sure. Yeah. So if you look at our EV forecast from even a year ago, we had a pretty optimistic view of what EV adoption in the U.S. market would look like. We were expecting, by the end of the decade, probably about, roughly a 25% market share for EVs. And certainly California being where I'm from, being one of the major drivers of it. California, of course, is one of the biggest, is the leading EV market, closely followed by Texas and Florida. So really, EVs have been kind of a smile state thing. But in California, EV demand really did kind of grow a lot more organically than it did in other parts of the country. So.
Initially driven by Tesla.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely
sure.
driven by Tesla. I mean, when the Model 3 came out back in, 2017, 2018, I mean, that provided to the market, really kind of the first, pretty affordable, but also truly desirable EV. And,
with a good range.
Yeah.
Great performance, and of course, great technology that was,
charging infrastructure.
All of that, absolutely. It was such a compelling thing that that was being offered to consumers, and consumers ate it up, particularly Californians. Now we're in a situation where Tesla's brand image is nothing like what it was back in 2017.
Certainly
2018.
changed.
Yeah. It's changed a bit.
Well, and their sales are dropping in California, although they've not gone off a cliff the way as has happened in Europe.
Oh, here's the irony, guys. The image of Tesla has changed, but the cars haven't.
Well,
They
that's
haven't been
just
really
another
updated.
problem. But
So-
let's Ed, go back to where you were. Tesla's its own thing in terms of the demand issues,
Yeah.
I think, and that's certainly something we can talk about. But I am interested in your take on kind of how the EV market overall looks like it's going to evolve now versus what you saw a year ago.
Right. Okay. So I mentioned that even a year ago we were expecting about 25% EV mix in the U.S. by the end of the decade.
Does that include hybrids or just
Just pure
battery
EVs.
electrics?
Yeah,
Okay.
battery electrics with California, and I brought up California because California would have been kind of the main driver of that adoption. Now, with our latest forecast update that we just completed about 2-3 weeks ago, we've dropped that to about 17% by the end of the decade. So
What's different? What are the drivers that differentiate last year's forecast from your most recent?
oh boy, where do we start? All right, well let's start with tariffs. So tariffs obviously will make all vehicles more expensive, and it's really taking new vehicle affordability to a different level. And affordability has already been a problem. I mean, the median price of a new vehicle already is about $50,000, and it's been that way since the pandemic, and it hasn't really gone down significantly. Now we're looking at new vehicle prices just in general that are going to be going significantly higher. We're also going to we're also staring down the barrel of a very likely recession. So all these are factors that are going to hurt new car demand, not just EVs but new cars in general. But EVs tend to cost more than the typical new vehicle, the typical gasoline new vehicles. So that brings EVs to an even less affordable space than they had in the past. So that's the first thing. That's tariffs will certainly impact pricing. It is very likely at this point that the federal tax credits on EVs will go away, with all the things happening in Washington right now. So that effectively takes the price of EVs even higher yet, because you're losing out on the tax credit. Just follow the money, right? I mean, when things get expensive, that negatively impacts demand. And then the third thing I want to mention too, I think it's been grossly underestimated by much of the industry just how much importance the public EV charging infrastructure has in terms of fostering EV demand and growing EV demand. Obviously, I mean, that was one of the magic bullets for Tesla. I mean, Tesla grew the way it did partially on the strength of its supercharger network. It took so much of the pain of trying to figure out how you're going to charge your electric car out of the equation. Now, with the elimination of so many of the things that were in the IRA, including money that had been earmarked for infrastructure development, well, that is pulling back on the progress that we had expected on public EV charging infrastructure development. So you're making the cars way more expensive. You're slowing down the progress of public charging development. That's all going to hurt EV demand significantly.
As an EV owner, going on a routine route is pretty easy for me because I know where the charger is, obviously, but it really limits my spontaneity when it comes to, okay, I want to go on a random trip. Or
Yeah, you can't do the Bruce Springsteen thing of just getting in your car and driving all night.
Right.
I call it that's the Bruce Springsteen complex. It's like everybody thinks they're going to get in their car and take a turn and never come back. It's just not. That's not how most people are. But if you can't do that, it bothers people.
So I was in Mackinac last week, and one of the reasons I didn't drive was, number one, I'm lazy. Number two, because I didn't want to stop because the Ioniq 5 doesn't get 300 miles of range. Yeah. And so I flew because I just didn't want to stop.
And that was ever so much better for the planet. Ed, I want to come back to something though, and I'll put you on the spot. So it does seem like there's been a kind of a live action demonstration in Germany of what happens when you withdraw EV subsidies. And I don't know if you've studied that. I'd be interested in your take on that and what that might tell us in the United States about what would happen.
Well, yeah. So if I remember correctly, Germany had either eliminated or sharply reduced those incentives at the beginning of last year, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And it was crisis essentially.
Right. And then and certainly we did see EV demand fall in Germany. I mean, it's it has since recovered somewhat, but you're absolutely right. I mean, in the months that followed the loss of those incentives, EV demand absolutely did take a big hit in Germany. What they didn't have that we're about to have happen here though is the impact of the tariffs, which didn't apply to the situation in Germany last year, plus also a very possible recession, which further limits consumers' spending power. If it was just a matter of incentives drying up and there was really nothing else to talk about beyond that, my outlook for EV adoption in the U.S. would be a lot more optimistic because I think the EV market can recover from one or two challenges like that, but to have this kind of wholesale across the board whole set of new challenges that didn't exist up until now, the combination of all that, is going to make life for EVs very difficult.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm just trying to work out myself. You mentioned tariffs. I mean, and tariffs have a hit at all levels of the automotive production chain, right?
Right, absolutely.
But when it comes to EVs, it seems like the tariffs are going to make the best battery technology, which is coming out of China, make that unaffordable is the right term, but certainly less affordable, significantly less affordable. And that seems like a real challenge because lithium-ion batteries, which are cheaper, better for a lot of uses, maybe not all, those are a Chinese product. And I've looked through the budget bill that the House passed, and not only there's going to be significant penalties and tariffs imposed by the administration on if you ship them from China, but if you try to build a Chinese IP battery in the United States, like say
which GM and Ford
want to do, well, now your factory is not going to get any federal incentives, at least under the House bill. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I just think there's a lot of logs being dropped in the path of affordable EVs and EV adoption in Washington.
The real crazy irony of all this is that before November 4th, when Trump was elected, our view on the affordable EV market was radically different from where we're at and what we're looking at now.
Go on.
We were So basically, we had been expecting 2025 and 2026 to be kind of the years that bring the new affordable EV products that will launch the next wave of EV adoption to come to market. Well, now it's kind of the opposite situation. But I mean, think about what was supposed to happen. We were supposed to get an entry-level Tesla. The Chevy Bolt was coming back. Kia was having two affordable EV products, EV3, EV4. Volvo, with their EX30, which starts like in the low 30s. And I mean, these are just a small number of examples of affordable EV products that were supposed to launch in the 25-26 timeframe,
and actually were attractive.
Yes.
And had decent range, and so
GM, the Equinox from GM, I think, which is in the market, but that was another. It's another example.
The Equinox was and is a hugely significant product for that reason. I mean, here's if you've ever looked at the specs on the base model Equinox EV, it's actually a really complete car. Like there's nothing, it has everything you need, even at, the $34,995 price point. That's affordable. I mean, that's $15,000 under the, price of a.
Even the Blazer sub.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
But from a GM anyway, but from a GM perspective, if you withdraw the $7,500 and you withdraw other incentives, production incentives, I think for the batteries, I'm not sure if they're getting the batteries from from the U.S., but those had a production incentive. And if you withdraw all of that federal support, now this thing has got to stand on its own from a business perspective, and I question whether they are ready for that.
I don't think. Well, yeah, that's going to be very challenging. I mean. The business cases for all these new affordable products had been, based on assumptions that don't apply anymore.
Well, it's that snowball effect. There's prices are higher, less charging infrastructure investment, and so it just creates a situation where we're actually moving backwards.
Absolutely,
we're not standing in place. We're moving backwards.
And this is happening while the rest of the world is moving forward on EVs. I think, for me, from where I sit, the big tragedy of all this is that, we're giving up leadership positions and, letting other markets take the lead on it. And, from a strategic long-term perspective, I don't really think that's the right direction to be going.
But that indicates to me that the automotive sector just doesn't have enough sway, or as much sway as it used to in DC, because this is whole hog going to hurt the North American, not even U.S., North American automotive sector.
Well, I mean, first, I think the oil industry won this round. Whether they'll win every round is a question, but the oil industry won this round. They've worked very hard to slow the adoption of EVs for obvious reasons. I do wonder, right, and I sort of agree with the premise, Ed, of what you've just been saying. I do wonder whether for North American-centric brands, GM, Ford, Stellantis,
Dodge.
North America, Dodge, Ram, and Jeep, whether there's a real risk if you don't have sort of force of will within those organizations, there's a real risk that you kind of become a combustion Renault or a combustion Nissan, where you're locked in to a region of the world with the technology that region is comfortable with. When you try to go out to the European market in 5 years or 10 years, or certainly the Chinese market right now, Southeast Asia down the road, Latin America, I'm not quite sure where Latin America is on this, but it just seems like the global nature of these companies is really at risk if they can't figure out a way to continue to scale electric vehicles and kind of the software brain vehicle, that kind of part and parcel of electrification.
Well, I have to qualify this, because the will part of what you're saying, I don't think any of us feel confident that they internally have that will. I could be wrong. I don't want to speak for you guys. But also, let's go a level deeper and say, does the current management team have this will? Does it need to be a new management team? Because at the end of the day, GM is hiring some new executives, Sterling Anderson, Kurt Kelty a year ago. These are, to me, are great hires. Ford had hired Doug Field. They have a Skunk Works team in LA or Southern California.
Right.
So these little moves seem to improve, but overall will of the company and direction of the company seems a little bit different. I don't question. I mean, I was just listening to back on an interview that Jim Farley at Ford, CEO of Ford, for the two people who might not know that, gave about, and I mean, I think he's committed. He's been to China. He's seen what's going on. He says if we don't compete with the Chinese, we're out of luck. I don't question his. I mean, take him at face value. I don't question his commitment, but I guess what I'm saying is, if the market inertia in the market that generates all the profit, which is for those companies, which is North America, if the market inertia is such that, look, your reward is to continue to produce V8 rear drive body on frame vehicles like you've done for the last 100 years or 80 years, that inertia is inertia. It's not taking you forward.
Yeah, and I mean, and we know that that they're continuing to make investments in these kind of old school powertrains. I mean, there's a new generation of
Tonawanda.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
over $800 million, right, in Tonawanda.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly where I was going with that. And yeah, so, we're still going down that path. And I get it. I mean, in the sense that certainly the sales of those vehicles fund so many other activities. So they're important in that
They
sense.
fund all the activities.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Fund all the activities, fine. But
let's be clear. Do you all believe that there's a real threat that they become at the extreme single product, single market, or a handful of products, single market companies?
Ed, you first.
Well,
I mean, yeah, I do, but go ahead.
I think, in the case of, the thing is that, all of the big three, these are all global companies. General Motors has a significant presence in China, and they have actually already far more EVs in China than they do here. So, so they work directly with Chinese partners like SAIC.
As Chevy leaves China last week, by the way.
I missed that news somehow.
Yeah, so Chevy's leaving China.
Oh, wow. Okay.
2 brands now.
Okay, so they got 2 brands.
Well, and if you don't include Baojuan and Wuling.
Yeah.
So
okay, 4 brands. Anyway, so but point being that I guess where I'm going with all this is that all the big three are global companies. Stellantis is global, Ford is global, GM is global. So it's not that they're going to be totally absent. From all the work and progress that's being done on electrification, but I do think that the powertrains for so many of the automakers are going to be regionalized longer than I had thought they would be. I had thought just even as recently as last year that by the early 2030s. There would be just a lot more consolidation and commonality powertrain wise across, various global lineups. But I don't think that's going to be the case, at least not in the short term.
Well, if it wasn't for tariffs and if it wasn't for, I think you might be right, like the consolidation there.
Well, and of course, the tariffs are a huge reason behind why I've changed my view on that. My prior view was based on prior realities.
Yeah, a prior reality. Look, I mean, I if I knew the future, that'd be great, right? I mean, I could bet on it and make billions. But yeah, I do think I think if you look at history, I do think that there's a real risk. And we've been talking a lot about the Detroit 3, and maybe we can broaden the conversation out to Toyota, Hyundai, and some of these other companies, which I do think have different.
Volkswagen is also
and Volkswagen,
in a very
they are. I agree,
Yeah.
and for some of the same reasons. But I do think that for GM and Ford and the North American piece of Stellantis, yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the trajectory, the risk that these companies will be pulled by the government policy that Ed, you've just been talking about, by the where their profit comes from, will be pulled to sort of focus on that North American combustion truck profit center, and then Europe goes 50 to 60% electric with this huge Chinese component to that. China is China. I think China is getting to be a lost cause for a lot of these Western brands. You both know more about that than I do, but that seems to be the case. Don't forget Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia being attacked heavily, right, by BYD and the other Chinese. In Latin America's there, and maybe that is, but it's not significant. It's not a big, huge market. It just seems like that's the risk, is that you wake up in 5 to 10 years and a lot of these Detroit brands that were once upon a time very global aren't.
The legacies need to look at Southeast Asia as the canary in the coal mine, because Latin America, where mass market vehicles are priced much lower, and that's where the Chinese live. So companies like Neta, BYD, sub $10,000, sub $15,000 cars that are really, really nice.
And they're building in Latin America as we speak.
Yeah. So to your
And selling.
point, Brazil was still going to likely be an ethanol, clean energy country for quite some time. And it's going to be the jumping off point for South America production. So that's going to be the battleground state, because Volkswagen, GM, all Stellantis, they've written multi-billion-dollar checks over the last few years. BYD, Great Wall, they're also there. So I think that's going to be the beachhead battleground that helps the legacies avoid being single market, single product entities. But, I got to push back on you a little bit, Ed, because they're global companies, but the largest markets in the world, they're becoming less and less relevant.
That is a interesting counterpoint.
So, because currently, I didn't know this until last year. Fiat's the number one selling brand in Brazil.
Yeah.
They have a strong presence in Brazil.
So,
for sure.
like, if BYD comes in, if these companies come in and undercut in a significant way, is that why? And I'm jumping around, but is that why Filosa was hired? Because his experience in Latin America and North America?
That's an interesting thought.
Because he's never worked in Europe.
Yeah, no, it seems like it, doesn't it? I mean, and again, that's where, Stellantis has a more balanced profit footprint than GM or Ford at this moment.
More balanced, but
balanced.
it's still pretty heavy in Detroit.
Yes, but it's very heavily North
Or
American
Auburn Hills.
or North America and South America.
Right.
At least as far as I know. Yeah, Europe is a tough one.
Because they have these schizophrenic brands like Citroen and Peugeot and aren't.
That's a whole nother podcast. Stellantis' 14 brands. But yeah, so I do think that I reread The Machine That Changed the World, the MIT, the James Womack and the MIT researchers looking at how Toyota disrupted the auto industry in the 80s and 90s. You read that, and the rhyming of history is pretty hard to ignore. I mean, Toyota brought, in a way, I think, less kind of full frontal challenge, because what Toyota did was optimized production of combustion vehicles. They weren't changing the fundamental technology of the vehicle. They were just doing ordinary combustion vehicles in a much more efficient way. Very profound, huge impact. Thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs in the Detroit automakers lost because they couldn't compete. And they couldn't compete for decades. And this is the point that this book makes. Is like
Feels like deja vu.
Yeah, it does feels like deja vu. And this book reminds you that okay, even when the leaders of these companies know intellectually and by observation know what's going on in China, which they do, reorienting these huge companies to fundamentally operate in a different way to match that system takes decades, and sometimes they'd never do it. The British auto industry never figured out lean production or even mass production. They didn't even figure out mass production. This is a great chapter in the book.
Why all the ultra premium brands are still built in the UK.
Yeah, they hand hammer the. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent, but I guess that's the thing I worry about is someone. And again, I'm not saying that I know this and nobody at any one of these companies has figured it out. Absolutely not saying that. I think they've all figured it out. The question is, oh my gosh, how do we do this again? We just finished ripping ourselves up to deal with the Toyota production system challenge and the lean production challenge. And we're just recovering from that. And now we got to go figure out what BYD is doing.
Well, the big challenge in my eyes for all of the legacy automakers, whether you're French, from Auburn Hills or Detroit, is that there's a technical challenge aspect to it, but also culture and speed. And to your point, the inertia is not going to get them. So they need to disrupt themselves somehow. And I don't know how they're going to do that. And that to me is the most concerning part, because they don't seem to be very urgent on doing a lot of things. Maybe behind the scenes they are, but
I would hope that at least behind the scenes they are, because outwardly it doesn't seem that way.
Do you guys agree with that?
Well, I think behind the scenes there's a lot of there's a lot of urgency. Look, everyone who's at the top of these companies, and including I would say Toyota. I'm less familiar with Hyundai, but they're of a generation.
But Hyundai's doing well.
Yeah, Hyundai's doing very well. And again, I mean, I suspect, or in fact, I think it's pretty clear if you look at some of the kind of comments about the tariffs, the sort of the polite applause that you're hearing from people like Mary Barra for tariffs. This is much directed at slowing Hyundai down as it is. The Chinese aren't a factor in this market. I mean, there's a few Chinese Volvos, right? But in general, they're a marginal factor.
That's a good
GM
point.
imports as many Chinese vehicles as almost anybody, or did. Right. But I think slowing Hyundai down is definitely that's good. Do that. That's great. We'll figure the rest of it out later.
As the manufacturing investments.
So I do think that, and there's something else, and Ed, kind of your thoughts on this too. If you look at the history, tariffs, we had the voluntary export restraints to hold back Japanese exports, which functioned as a tariff, essentially, right? Raised prices. And yet, over the 15 or 20 years from start of those, the Japanese brands Toyota, and then later Hyundai, and later the Germans gain share, because they invested in production within the walls in the United States. And that is the thing that, again, as someone who looks at history, I say the first Chinese company, maybe not with the administration that's in power today, but in a future administration that comes and says, we're going to put $5 billion and create 8,000 jobs in a state of your choice. How is that going to be rejected?
It can't. It won't.
Well, there's a higher likelihood it's rejected by the Midwestern states than the Southern states, I would think.
Well, yeah, but I guess that's I mean, there's an infrastructure for supporting automotive production in the Southern states that's every bit as powerful and good as the one that exists in the Midwest. It's been built over the
an ex-union.
And ex-union. Anyway, you see my point. I just feel like the tariffs will be a very temporary relief from the competition.
Yeah, I agree that it'll be temporary. I mean, again, going back in history and looking at the 80s, I mean, even though there were these restrictions in place, as you point out, their market share kept going up and up and up, partially due to the investments in manufacturing, but also because the consumer perceived a benefit to they perceived clear benefits and advantages to so many of these import brand vehicles. They were getting driving dynamics and build quality and reliability that they weren't getting from the homegrown competition at the time.
Well, and this goes back to your point about how they've become truck and SUV because they abandoned the small car.
Yeah, effectively
sedan.
they did. Yeah,
and then the Japanese and now the Koreans have kind of taken up that spot.
Yeah, no, and for electrification, and again, I'm kind of channeling something that Jim Farley has been saying here. In electrification, you saw the Detroit brands and really, I would say even Tesla say, okay, just as with combustion vehicles, bigger is better. So let's make Cybertrucks and let's make Hummers and all that stuff. And those things are flopping. So it does seem like the challenge is going to be, well, how do you make a lighter, maybe smaller, more affordable vehicle that's electric or advanced?
Well, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about Rivian, Lucid, Slate, and some of these other, because unfortunately, those are the only ones I can think of coming out of the United States. Now, if we talked about China, I'm sure you could think of more than 5 brands.
Probably.
And you're not even really studying
20.
the China market like me. Rivian and Lucid, I still think they have teething issues. They have blocking and tackling with manufacturing. But are you doing research on these subset of brands that are newer to the market and how they're being... I guess price is obviously a major concern,
Sure.
but they're also coming out with R2s, maybe baby gravities. Slate is coming out with supposedly a $25,000. So maybe can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what makes these new electric vehicles from these newer startups interesting is that not only are they coming from unfamiliar brands, but in most cases, these products are, from a product perspective, bringing something, that's new to the table, something that, hasn't really been done before, or at least not done in a very long time. Let's look at the most obvious example, Slate. The Slate product is truly unlike anything else that's available in the market right now. Now, that type of product was very common 30, 40 years ago, namely, kind of a bare bones 2-seat regular cab truck with wind-up windows and a rubber floor. Inherently very different from anything that's in the market right now. The jury's out on whether that'll fly or not. We can talk more about that later. Then you look at Rivian. I mean, Rivian launched with, one of the first electric pickups, to come out in this market. And they did a very, very good job of cultivating what the brand meant and what the brand represents. In a lot of ways, I think Rivian is as much a triumph of marketing and messaging as it is the product itself. They've done a tremendous job of creating this Rivian brand image. And then Lucid, I would say Lucid probably has the most work to do as far as really communicating to the consumer what they're all about and why they matter and all that. They do have their mainstream mid-size crossover product coming out by the end of this year. We'll see what that product turns out to be, but it's every bit their intention that that's the product that will really define to the consumer, hey, we're Lucid, we're a volume brand, we're here. At this point in time, don't really know fully what the messaging of that product will be, but we'll see. But
If and I have to say, I'm sure you guys have driven them too.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the Lucid. I really like the R1.
Yeah.
I think if they can derive but still keep that DNA at a $45,000 price point or $40,000 price point, and they can actually make them in volume, I think that's actually a blocking and tackling challenge for them, then they can be successful. But Lucid is like it's struggling the most from a share price standpoint.
Sure. It's struggling from that standpoint. Lucid does have this one kind of a secret sauce sort of a thing that I think the general consumer isn't too aware of, and I feel like Lucid probably needs to do a better job of really communicating that. And that is the efficiency of their motors.
Yes.
They have tons of patents on their motor technology, as well they should. Look, I've driven the Air extensively. In fact, I took it on a very, very long road trip and was just blown away at both the efficiency number as well as the actual range itself. It's like, holy crap, this is unheard of. I've never driven an EV where I was completely lacking any sense of range anxiety or anything.
And it's a big car.
It's a big car. It's a huge car. So now, apparently, and I've spoken to a lot of the people at Lucid, and that same motor technology will be in their new midsizer. The real big advantage that Lucid likes to talk about regarding the efficiency of the motor is that they can use less battery. Because the motor is so efficient, they can use less battery, which means lighter weight, lower cost, obviously, which I think is the biggest potential benefit. If you're using less battery, the vehicle is going to cost less. So depending on how they really package all that and the communications they do when this new midsize product launches, I don't know. I mean, maybe they really will have something that offers something very relevant to the mainstream consumer. We'll see. But I guess the overall point I'm getting at, though, for these three brands is that compared to the legacies, they are all offering something unique, something that's different, something that the legacies aren't yet providing. Think back, a decade beyond that, when Tesla was still a startup, it was the same thing. Tesla think about the EVs that were coming from the legacies at that time.
Or science projects.
Yeah, they're science products. They're all,
Compliance.
like little compact hatchbacks, that could only go about 80 miles on a charge if you were being really gentle on the throttle. I mean, and then all of a sudden, here's Model S, this big, sexy, crazy fast, electric luxury sedan, with at the time like an almost 300-mile range. Now it's way more than that, but at the time, I mean, anything that was above 80 miles, was kind of a big deal, and this was like close to 300.
It was a striking car at that time.
Yeah, I know, and
absolutely, and I think that's where the opportunity for any of these startups is. It's to offer something that is truly breakthrough, that the legacies aren't doing, and has a clear consumer benefit. And Tesla, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, there were so many consumer benefits: the power, the range, the charging infrastructure. The legacies couldn't provide any of that, and that powered Tesla's rapid growth through all throughout last decade.
Yeah, and I agree that it's too soon. I mean, I think everything we said about the risk to the EV sector and the EV development in the United States is right. Mm-hmm. I mean, withdrawing billions in federal support is a big deal. Tariffs are a big deal. On the plus side, that's what you're talking about. On the plus side, over the next several years, we're going to see a flood, new vehicles, new designs. The Slate,
hopefully.
Unless they're canceled. But I certainly from the Rivians and Slates of the world, they're going to, unless they just fold up, they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Let's hope. I agree. I mean, I'm very interested in the Slate concept. I don't believe that they're going to sell very many $25,000 trucks. I think they might sell a lot of $35,000 and $40,000 trucks, plussed up with all the options. But I think the fundamental premise of Slate and the way they're going at it is super interesting. And I guess the question is whether the customers will come along with them.
I have so many thoughts on that.
Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts, because I know AutoPacific studies consumer uptake and attitudes on technology, and from what I've read of AutoPacific's work, it's like, oh yeah, consumers, they're really slow on the uptake. A lot of them, certainly baby boomers, maybe other people too. But talk about that.
Yeah. So if you go into any automotive forum or message board or Facebook group or whatever, you're always going to find these very vocal enthusiasts who are like, I just want a bare bones, vehicle with vinyl seats and rubber floor. I want crank windows. I don't want no newfangled infotainment system. I don't even want a screen.
And by the way, it's a station wagon from Europe.
Of course, and it's brown and it's diesel.
Yeah, but go on.
But anyways, these people are very vocal, but they're also, as our data consistently show, a pretty small minority. You look at when you go through our data and you try to filter out those people that match that description. It's a very, very, very small portion of the new of.
So you're saying they're an edge case?
Huh? Oh, they're absolutely an edge case. Now, Slate wants to sell about 150,000 units a year of this Slate pickup. I'm not even sure that Ford sells 150,000 F-150 regular cab base pickups, and we're talking F series. I don't even think Ford sells that many.
Not the stripped down base. I don't think so.
Right. So Slate is trying to sell 150,000 units of this stripped out base DIY truck, yes.
Stripped down truck.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, and again, I mean, I love the concept.
Yeah, so the concept is interesting, and yeah, I do think that there is a segment of the market that will be very interested in that. But I think several things limit it. The lack of four doors is going to severely limit its reach. The U.S. is a predominantly four-door market. I mean, even pickup trucks. I mean,
Maverick.
Yeah, I don't know what the breakdown is, but it's a solid majority of pickups are going.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, big majority, right?
Even extended cab pickups, not the crew cabs, but the extended cab pickups. Even those, as of late, have adopted forward swinging doors. Just like on an SUV or a crew cab pickup. Clearly, that's where the market. That's what the majority of the market wants in a truck. Because a truck, the modern truck nowadays is really truly an everything vehicle. It's the commuter, it's the family car, it's the recreation vehicle, it's the work vehicle. And the beauty of a pickup is that it does everything. Literally
it's a luxury vehicle, and I mean that's been.
And it's a luxury vehicle.
It's a luxury
right.
vehicle.
The Slate product is a very narrowly focused product, at least in its base form. Now, of course, Slate's business model is really dependent on the accessorization. I mean, you're buying a 2-seat regular cab pickup, but you can turn it into a 5-seat SUV. Well, it's going to be a two-door one, but a 2-door SUV. Oh, you can through an accessory package, bolt in a rear seat, bolt in some seat belts, bolt in a roll cage and a fiberglass topper, and voila, you've got yourself an SUV. And that's really where Slate is expecting to make their money. There's very little, if any, margin built into the basic truck itself. It's what you're going to put on the truck afterwards that's going to, that's where they'll make their money. So it is a radically new idea. The jury is, it's too early to say whether it's going to be a successful strategy or not. I personally think it might be a little narrowly focused, but at the same time, I've been wrong plenty of times before, and I do think that certainly Slate is following the startup tradition of offering something that no one else is.
But the caveat is that in the real world, and this is where you're kind of alluding to, in the real world, your surveys show that people buy vehicles, they get all kinds of like driver assistance technology. That they don't even use. They don't even figure out how to use technology that could actually enhance safety or enhance their quality of life behind the wheel. And that seems like a real yellow flag for the whole industry.
Yes, and it's interesting that Slate even talks about how, I mean, other than the federally mandated Ford collision stuff, I mean, it's pretty much ADAS free. So here's the thing. ADAS is obviously almost universal now. I mean it's standard in so many. The full ADAS suite is standard in so many vehicles, and pretty low cost for vehicles where it's optional. and the industry has been very quick to adopt these features. I mean,
But not all ADAS is created equal.
well, no, that's true. That's true.
Blue Cruise, Super Cruise, FSD,
Oh yeah. That's like the next level of ADAS. I'm really just kind of talking about even stuff like adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assist and blind spot and all that sort of stuff. Just an anecdotal story. I mean, I have multiple friends who've bought new vehicles in the last few years, and almost none of them will use the adaptive cruise control that came in their cars. Why? Well, they're scared of it. To people like us, I mean, we work in the industry, we're familiar with the technology, and we're comfortable with it. But to the layperson, that just person off the street, they're not involved with the industry in any way. A car is a transportation device to get from here to there. Well, features like adaptive cruise control, that's taking a lot of people outside of their comfort zone. They're not really ready for the idea of a car that can regulate its own speed.
But Ed, can you pull out that broad brush and say people, or is there a certain demographic? Is it younger people are also not using it?
No, that's a great point, because it's absolutely true when you look through our data that the older you get, the demand for those sorts of features, for those sorts of ADAS features, shrinks.
Because I would argue, a Ioniq 5, those little simple features are actually pretty clunky. They're not well. I don't know what these new little symbols look like and what they mean. So I'm pressing these buttons. And I'm like, should I watch a YouTube video for my car? Maybe, but you should make it user friendly.
Well, I think
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and that's probably some of what's driving your results, right? The surveys is that there's the technology's kind of, the interfaces aren't the best, and some are better than others, but also, I mean, and maybe this is outside your scope, but it also seems like the training, such as it is, you show up at a dealer, they throw you you sign the papers, they throw you the keys, and that's about it.
Yeah, at most they'll. Having bought several new cars over the last few years, they generally won't go over the ADAS stuff with you. They'll tell you how to set your radio presets and stuff, and that's kind of the extent of it. Just the most basic functions, to be able to get you from here to there. But they're generally not teaching you how to.
So maybe the root cause is they don't use it because they don't know how to use it, as opposed to they don't use it because they don't trust it.
They don't know how, or people don't have to either, because, I mean, Ed, you said it. I mean, a lot of people, again, people who are more enthusiastic about cars is a minority. And the people who are just like, look, I want this thing to start every day, take me to my job every day, take me to pick up the kids every day, not break down. That's it.
Right.
I mean, that's been the Toyota's made a really great business for 50 or 60 years in this country by doing that, not because of their style, not because of their, exotic feature content, right?
They're reliable vehicles that do everything that they're asked to do on a purely functional level.
But that's where I think we get back into the average price of a vehicle has increased, because they're stuffing them with features that people don't want and charging them for it. It's not like we're getting these for free.
No, it's the way of raising revenue per vehicle for sure.
Right, absolutely, and I feel like that has been such a huge focus among the automakers. I mean, of course, it's always a focus, but I feel like this very aggressive rise in new vehicle transaction prices. Yeah, sure, some of it was driven by the pandemic and all that. I absolutely agree with both of you that a lot of this also has to do with feature content. I mean, the standard Toyota safety suite, that even a basic Corolla has, that has adaptive cruise control. It's got lane keep assist. It's got all those features, and that's on a base Corolla now. But that base Corolla is
that undercuts most cars in the from the Western legacy automakers here in North America.
Right. But but we're also living in an era where a base model Corolla with plastic hubcaps is now like a $23,000 car. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that you could, 10 years ago you could get a base model Corolla, for about 15, 16 grand. It didn't have any of these ADAS features, but at the time, people weren't really asking. The general consumer, the general Corolla consumer, wasn't really asking for those things anyways. I don't think it had a screen. There was no infotainment system. There was just a radio, which was fine for that basic Corolla customer. But yeah, now that basic entry-level Corolla customer doesn't have the option of not having those things. They're going to have an 8-inch
They're going to pay for it.
And they're going to have, have adaptive cruise control, and they're going to have all these electronic safety aids that they didn't necessarily ask for, but they're going to get it and they're going to pay for it.
So as your teams at AutoPacific survey customers, I'm curious, is there something that pops out in the surveys, and maybe it's something that be working on for clients, where customers are saying, "I wish I had fill in the blank."
Ooh, that's a good one.
Or another way to look at it might be, what are the most used features?
Oh, well, I'll tell you the one that for the last 3 years running, there's one feature that has always been number one: wireless phone charger. Everybody wants that. That is for 3 years running.
The faster the better kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's just convenient. You're not plugging your phone in to the car. You're just laying it on this pad and it charges. So yeah, generally speaking, the features that people want the most are very relevant convenience features like that. Like, everyone's got a phone. So to have a wireless charger in your car, that's a very relevant thing because it aids convenience for something that you absolutely have, which is a phone. And then the other category of features that always comes up really strong are things related to safety. Safety is always sold. I mean, that's a lesson that automakers learned many, many decades ago. If you position something as a safety feature and can really, convince the consumer that if you buy and pay for this feature, your safety is enhanced, well, people will, tend to, raise their hand and say, okay, yeah, I do want that.
And safety translates because it's one of the top two things in China too.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, people want to be able to, survive a car crash. Imagine that. So, but yeah, it's basically relevant convenience features and safety features that really always kind of come out top. But they have to be, as far as the safety features go, they have to be. I'm going to use that word relevant again. I mean, I could make the argument that adaptive cruise control, which we just talked about, it can be a safety feature. But clearly the consumer doesn't really perceive it that way. The consumer, is, for whatever variety of reasons, they're not interested in using it. I should say the consumer, some consumers, many consumers are not comfortable using it, or they just don't want to use it. They don't see the value in it, and they don't see or perceive a safety benefit to it. So hence it doesn't sell.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, I do think that, I'm interested in kind of as you're trying to predict the future. That's always a difficult thing to do in the best of times. But it seems like right now, because of all the things that we've been talking about, tariffs and policy, it seems like predicting the future just on any level of this technology take or any of that, it must be super hard. I'm sort of wondering, what are you hearing from your OEM or supplier customers about that?
Well, I'll start that response by saying that this is one hell of a time to try to be a sales forecaster.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for us to be trying to predict the future, predict volumes, predict what segments and features are going to, really resonate in the future. I mean, boy, that is really hard right now, because what we are really lacking the most right now is any kind of stability. I mean, basically every day there is, some new tariff threat or a pullback on the tariffs. Oh, no, it's back. And, if there's no consistency, then we don't know how to react or respond to it. We don't know how to plan for it if we don't really know what the reality is. And that's really what it comes down to right now. We don't know the reality 6 months from now. We don't know the reality even 3 months from now. So trying to figure any of that out is just is crazy difficult.
Yeah, no, it seems like a nightmare because, again, just within the past couple of weeks, right? We've had, some tariffs were declared illegal until they weren't.
Yeah.
Except those weren't the auto tariffs, except some of them would have been auto tariffs. But then the aluminum, I have
the chicken tax and all these.
Right. And the aluminum was going to have a 25% tariff. Oh, wait, it's a 50% tariff. But get me your best deals by Wednesday. This is.
And then now steel.
And steel and aluminum. So it seems to me if these auto companies don't even know what the costs of steel and aluminum, which is fundamental, let alone all the rest of the stuff. But if you don't even know what the steel and aluminum bill is going to be, how can you figure? And you're bumping up against, again, Ed, as you pointed out, you're bumping up against an affordability ceiling for a lot of people. 50,000, that's a lot for a lot of people. It seems like you can't just say, well, whatever it is, we'll just charge for it. It's going to be whatever it is. We're going to have to do triage to keep the selling price of the vehicle somewhere close to where it's at, or else we're going to have to close plants because there'll be no demand.
Yeah.
Well, look at the backlash on Stellantis, just because of almost all their premium products were, I mean, they were price gouging.
Right. And you know, and that all that Stellantis stuff happened way before, you know, everything that's happening right now. I mean, that was simply a case of, you know, the prior CEO making certain decisions that, you know, made prices go way up. And obviously we all know what happened to Stellantis last year in terms of their sales, and they're still trying to recover from it and all that. So yeah, I mean, price matters. I mean, you know, for most consumers, you know, that's the bottom
And here's
line.
the crazy thing too, is that powertrain agnostic, a lot of parts, a lot of components come from China, whether you're building an ICE vehicle or not. So many that there aren't an alternate source in North America where there's a tariff-free product that you can buy or a component.
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
can buy.
as we're recording this, and this is being reported multiple outlets, there's a crisis kind of coming down the pike on the availability of permanent magnets and these advanced magnets that are 90%.
Because we're doing tit for tat.
Yeah, well, that's right. So that's a trade policy outcome, but now it's suddenly occurred to everyone and swum up into the radar. Oh, wait, the Chinese aren't shipping these magnets, and these magnets are used in everything.
Everything.
So
E-motors,
you can't
every consumer
servos
product.
in the windows, regulators, all this stuff. So you're not going to be able. It'll be the same. It seems to me. I hope I'm wrong. It seems to me that you could have bride of semiconductor crisis, except this time it's magnets. And it just seems like the instability, there's layers to the instability that seems like policymakers haven't fully sussed out yet.
And so for the audience, there are minerals that go into lithium batteries. So like nickel, cobalt, there aren't rare earth, they're minerals. And then there are rare earths that go into magnets.
That are used in the drive motors and many other things.
And guess what? China controls the mining and refining of everything, pretty much. Now, GM did write a $500 million check to Lithium America. Lithium America's Nevada, Colorado area, but that's not going to glean any significant lithium for years.
It doesn't seem like that's going to solve a problem that could be upon us within a couple of months, or maybe is upon us right now.
Yeah, so the other green shoot
lot of
that's
instability.
still years away is both Ford and GM talked about LMR, so manganese-rich batteries. But again, there's no capacity to build it. They're still in trying to validate the commercialization opportunities because they can't mass produce anything yet. And so we're still years away from even thinking about gaining any significant independence from China on basic components.
Yeah, nobody said this was easy.
I mean, so we are sitting in New Lab, which creates opportunities for startups. But when we're talking about mining, when we're talking about batteries, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of investment.
Billions.
That the U.S. government needs to help put their thumb on the scale to subsidize some of that stuff. And we're not willing to even do that. And that's the reality of it. You know, we don't have refining for minerals or rare earths. We don't own mining rights for a lot of these minerals, or we don't own the significant mining rights for a lot of these minerals. And I know we're still talking about EVs and batteries and stuff, but even the magnets go into ICE vehicles.
They go into everything.
Of course.
Yeah, so full circle to hand crank windows. Whoever's out there, suppliers who still make hand crank window hardware, this is your lucky day.
let me pick. That's the bone I'm going to pick with Slate. I don't know if American consumers want to decontent their vehicles.
I think we're going to find out.
Because we talked about features that they don't use, but I've had it. It's on my spec sheet. Even if I don't use it, I want it. And so if I have a button that puts my window down and I don't have it anymore and I'm hand cranking things and I don't have an infotainment and I don't have CarPlay and Android, I want it. And so I don't know if the American consumer can kind of square that circle.
Well, an
where,
affluent American consumer, and again, I'd be an eager consumer of AutoPacific research on this subject.
So I think I think one of the challenges of the idea of a stripped down, and I'm certainly not dooming it, trying to doom it to failure, but I think one of the challenges to overcome is that the type of consumer that could be very interested in a very, very bare bones, super ultra decontented vehicle. Well, part of the reason that they may be interested in that level of decontenting is a cost, which would then imply that they may be of lower income, which in turn means that they may be less likely to own their own single family detached home, which is kind of a prerequisite to having home.
So basically, you're saying they don't own their own plug to plug it in,
and that's that, and then combine that with the divestment of the U.S.'s divestment of building out more charging infrastructure. I mean, it's kind of a bad combination. I mean, you're targeting a customer that may be less likely to have home charging, and then the public charging situation,
not getting better fast enough.
Not getting better fast enough.
The last thing I'll say about the whole Slate thing is that I'm biased, I'm jaded because I was just in China, as you both know, and I know what you can get for $25,000 US or $40,000 US in China.
Well, and I'll tell you what, and as we're perhaps winding down today, but the thought for the next time, that's right. And guess what? And I know this point is being made by a number of people. We now have the internet. Everybody in the United States of America who cares can figure out what you can get for $25,000 in China. I mean,
well, Ed sees it every day.
Ed, you see it too. You're telling them. Lots of people are telling them.
No, I'm saying he sees BYDs coming across the border.
Yeah, I have two things to say really quick. I don't mean to interrupt you, but two really important points that I want to bring up. One is that you were talking earlier about how Southeast Asia is sort of a canary in the coal mine. Well, I would argue so is Mexico.
Yeah.
All you got to do is drive down to San Diego, which is right on the border, and just marvel at the sheer numbers of BYDs and Changans and JACs and MGs, and I mean they are everywhere. They've become very popular in Mexico because there's just a lot of value there. So imagine if those cars were sold here. It would be the same thing. I mean, these are attractive, high value vehicles that,
So for the Joe White followers that don't know me, I was able to drive a BYD Han L and a Tong L, the newest versions of their flagship BYD brand vehicles. The Tong is a SUV, the Han is a sedan, $45,000 that have megawatt charging or mega charging capabilities. Number one, the Han I got into, it had a label on the back, 2.7. because it goes 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds for $45,000.
Which is just nuts.
And you get into the vehicle, and it's not some ostentatious interior. It's a really, really nice interior for $45,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for those that don't know what mega charging is, it's 400 kilometers or 240 miles in 5 minutes of charging.
Yeah, which is, and I know
same as gas.
Yeah, that is a big deal. And again, I think that goes back to the point we made earlier, and maybe we wrap on this note if you want to. That's the risk of going to sleep.
Well, yes.
That's the risk of going to sleep.
And I just want to make this one other point, which is, so one thing that I didn't talk about earlier was some research we had done, very interesting research we had done on American new car shoppers' awareness of Chinese brands and Chinese vehicles. And the results were pretty shocking to us because we were not expecting the awareness to be as high as it was. But then you dig deeper into it, and then you look at, and the reason I thought of this is because you were just talking about the internet and what the internet provides to consumers and shoppers. So you dig deeper into the data. So how and why is their awareness so high? Because of TikTok, because of Instagram, all this stuff. I mean, basically, your typical American social media user now has access to knowledge about every product in the world. So they know what a BYD is. They know what a Geely is. They know what a Zeekr is. And they're like, those cars are awesome. And then now that's being amplified further because, and I'm not really sure how these cars are getting in here, but there are various social media influencers who are rolling around all through California in various various Chinese vehicles. A buddy of mine just 2 weeks ago found two influencers in a parking lot in Irvine, California, driving that big Li Auto van.
Yeah, the Mega.
Mega, yeah. They were driving the Li Auto Mega. So he actually went up to them and was like, what's the story here? And they explained, we're both influencers and they wanted us to drive this for 2 weeks.
Yeah. They're playing a long game.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so disappointed that
Two.
the top things wasn't reading my newsletter after 7 years of writing. I'm finally no. But anyways, what's disappointing to me is I was at the Shanghai Auto Show, as you both know. Yeah. There were more influencers, like Western influencers there, than there were Western journalists.
Yes.
I mean, American. Now, I understand there's a visa challenge with some of that stuff, but it just seemed like U.S. executives and journalists might not have been as interested in this stuff. Now, I understand they're covering Trump and trade and stuff, but this is at your doorstep. iShowSpeed was probably the best, which is an influencer on TikTok. He was probably the best ambassador China could have had.
Yeah.
And he's an American guy.
Yes, absolutely.
The word is going to get out. It's not going to be a secret, and I don't. Especially, I'm kind of putting myself in the head of an affluent, the kind of car buyer that every car company wants. Someone who's affluent, informed, enthusiastic about technology. Unlike a lot of the people that you've surveyed, if those people who are the best customers you can have are saying, "I'm not going to buy a second-rate, behind-the-curve product." And by the way, we talk a lot about legacy automakers. Tesla's got a version of the same problem. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see play out over the next few years.
To wrap this up, let me hammer this home. BYD is in over 100 countries. NIO is going to be in close to 35 by the end of this year. XPeng, these are three pretty famous, not famous, but well-known Chinese brands. XPeng is going to be in about 50. So to your point, Joe, they're just going to surround us. Because one of the groups that I saw at the Shanghai Auto Show was some Canadian dealership groups that were kicking the tires on Chinese EVs because they were like, well, if we're going to have a conflict with the United States, we should bring in reinforcements.
Yeah.
And that dam is going to break pretty soon.
Oh, yes, it will.
Because it's already cracking in Mexico.
Absolutely.
There's 15 Chinese brands. They're not EVs. They're ICE brands.
Yeah.
And so, Ed, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This is one of our first episodes, so, apologies for being a little clunky, but hopefully, because I learned a lot, my expertise is less the North American market than anything, and Joe is the ultimate pro. So hopefully our audience gets some benefit out of this, because I think we talked about some non-traditional market research that's pretty interesting and I think important.
And hope to have you back as you get more.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You need to make it back to Michigan more often, so Joe and I can have you back over here. So.
That'll be amazing. So yes, thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.